Hey folks, welcome to another top 10 list. Yes, now that I'm finally starting to catch up with some of that SM backlog, I can finally find some time to get some top 10 videos done. And I've got suggestions from my Patreons, of which ones I want to do and when they want to see it. So, you've got stuff to look forward to, like, let me have a quick gander in my little black book of loveliness. Let's see, ideas that are spinning around my head. I got like top 10 games for less than £20. Top 10 party games, maybe. Top 10 games with a good replay value. I think that's a definite. I think that was highly voted on, actually. Top 10 middleweight games. That's definitely happening. We always talk about top 10 heavy games, top 10 light games, or gateway games. We don't tend to see a lot in the midweight category, so that should be a good discussion point. But today, I'm talking about top 10 reprints. And with this one, when I was talking about 2019, I said I wasn't as big of a fan of 2019, and I kind of stick by that. It wasn't particularly a favourite year for me, especially when, as I look at my top 10 of 2019 list, several of them were basically reprints. And I like reprints. A game that's been out of print for ages, that maybe could use a bit of streamlining, some rules tweaks, and aesthetical improvement. I really get excited when they're bringing it out. And this may not even be for games that I'm not interested in before. It's like, oh wait, this looks shiny, maybe I should give this one a look again. So reprints are definitely a good thing for the hobby, especially if an old game deserves that reprint. It's like, oh, it was really popular and it's a great game, but no one's got it. Oh wait, now it's coming out again. Sweet. So, certainly there's a few on my shelf I get behind reprints, and these are my top 10. Now, the caveat with this one is that basically it doesn't have to necessarily be called second edition, third edition, or anything like that. It just had to be reprinted, not just simply printed like another print run. It needed to have changes to it, both in content, content, aesthetics, rules tweaking, stuff like that. It needed to be more than just simply the same game re-released. And for all of these, I think I'm okay with that. And I will say that for one or two of these, I don't necessarily need to enjoy the game as much. There are some on here where I'm like, well, if I never play it, I'm not that fussed. But credit where it's due, it did a good job with the reprint side. So it's not just simply, do I enjoy this reprint? It's like, what top 10 games do I think really worked as a reprint? But, we'll get on to that. So without further ado, let's get started.
Get on with it.
My number 10 is a Days of Wonder game that was reprinted by Taste New Minstrel Games. This one got quite a bit of a flack for, being not of an aesthetic style that people were a big fan of. The original looked really good, but looked a bit more serious, whereas this one definitely went down what seemed like a more cartoony route. But it was a solid game in its own right. I was glad to see it reprinted because it was not impossible to get hold of, and to be fair, it's still a pretty good production value and another cool implementation of Colosseum. This is effectively the second edition of Colosseum, where you are putting on a show for like the Emperor and the Senators, and you've got to get all sorts of things like, lions and fighters and chariots and, vases and trees and all sorts of things to put in your show. There's all these different shows in a big compendium book, effectively, and, book or tile, I forget what it is, the rule sheet. And, you need different requirements for each, and you get more points if you have more of the requirements than you need. You're trading with other players for these things. So it's like, I got 2 bushes. Do you need a bush? I need a chariot. Give me the chariot. I'll give you a bush. All right, I'll give you a bush and a horse as well. Come on, you've got that cool trading phase. And the best way to play this game is to really ham it up. I mean, go watch I forget which Dice Tower Marathon they did it in, but they did a Dice Tower Marathon where all of them played a 5 or 6 player game of this game, and they had to explain what show they did with what they had. You go with the title and everything. It is one of the funniest portrayals of a Euro game I have ever seen. And I always like to enforce that when I play this game. I'm like, okay, if you don't want to, you don't have to. But seriously, try and explain what's going on in your show. And it leads to some amazing laughs. So, this one's more out of the fact that it needed a reprint, because I think it's still a solid game in its own right, even though it has a minor roll and move mechanic. It's still good fun. Not the lightest of games ever. I mean, people think, oh yeah, I can get new people into this game. Really? With that giant sheet full of shows that you're putting on? That's pretty overwhelming for many people. But it's just, don't take it too seriously. Great bit of light fun. Colosseum, my number 10. My number 9, I thought I could see over there, but no, it's in one of my bags because I took it to a game night. One of my first games that ever got me into gaming, and I'm not talking about 6 years ago when I came to the Portsmouth Game Club and played my first like Seven Wonders game there. I'm talking about one of the first sort of modern games post, I think it was 2000 it was released, or maybe it was after that, I forget. But this was one of the games that I remember playing a lot at university and not realizing that this is what modern games could be now. And that is Citadels. No, I was listening out for Eric somewhere, I couldn't hear anything. But with Citadels, this is the 2016 reprint of this. And you might think, well, hang on a minute, it's just Citadels, it didn't change anything. Excuse me, have you seen how this looks? You know, the other cards were like about yay small and the artwork was okay, but nothing special. Now you've got tarot-sized cards, which I love. The artwork is drop-dead gorgeous. You've got this cool crown miniature, and as well as having the original cards and the Dark City expansion built in, which eventually they did with the previous version, they also added a third set of characters. So now you have between 2 to 3 different characters for every number in the 1 to 9 chain. I think less with the 9 because it's got special rules for that one. But from 1 to 8, I think there's at least 3 different characters now that you can use. And the book gives you suggested setups. You want a really mean game, a light game, a money-rich game, that kind of thing. And it just was a big boost to what is already an evergreen game for Fantasy Flight games and one of my favorite games of all time. It's like around the 50 mark. I think this tends to hang around the 50 or so in my top 100 quite a bit. I do really love this game, and to have a nice shiny version that's all condensed into one box with easy to read cards, you know, people don't have to squint to see it or read a bit of text. No, you've got this giant card now that's just great to hold, that one card with the mage in your hand, and it was a solid reprint all round, you know. I mean, this game was already great beforehand. To now get a cool version of it definitely deserved a number 9 spot. My number 8 is a Ryan Lockett game, and you're probably thinking, well, that must be Empires of the Void 2 then. Not quite, because with the rules that I set, Empires of the Void 2 doesn't quite meet the criteria for a reprint. Because this isn't just simply saying, oh, this is Empires of the Void reprinted. This one is fundamentally different from the first edition. Yes, there are some similarities about being good with people and being bad, you know, and conquering them, but a lot of the rules changed in this. I mean, this is almost unrecognizable from the first version. So it's not quite a reprint. This is like a completely new game. The Ancient World, however, I feel was similar enough to its first version, even though it had some tweaks and some aesthetic improvements, where it could be considered for this list. And the Ancient World is a solid Ryan Lockett game in its own right. You're doing the classic Eurofane of building up buildings with a tableau in front of you of cards, but the twist with this is you've got workers that you put out in order to do the actions, but depending on how experienced those workers are, they can block other people. But the amusing thematic nature with this is that you've got these titans that are effectively like bashing down on your settlement. You've got like one that's constantly in your face all the time, and you've got these other titans that appear, all these big huge monsters from like any fantasy show you can think of, and you're beating these back in order to get banners to score you points, which is fairly dry. But to do so, you're getting these military cards, you know, building up your military force. And as the military people get more expensive to hire, eventually you retire them, but they go upside down underneath another regiment. And it's like they've taught their experience to the newcomers. Again, a very thematic touch. But it's hard to describe this game, really, because it feels like it's a collection of mechanics in there. You've got tableau building, you've got worker placement, you've got hand management, you've got... it's quite a few things going on in here. But I enjoy it. It looks beautiful on the table. It's not that difficult to learn. And, you know, you've got a little bit of interaction with other players, with the workers, and, you know, going after their Titan. You know, like I might kill off your Titan because it's beneficial for me, even though it's slightly helping you out. This was a solid reprint all round and not too dissimilar to the first edition. They did tweak a few rules to streamline it and, you know, improved on the aesthetics, and, you know, it felt more like a reprint with some changes as opposed to completely new game. If this one did fit the criteria, then yeah, this one would have like kicked Ancient World off its plateau because, you know, I love this one like crazy. But Ancient World 2.0 is definitely like a solid reprint, a solid game. Doesn't get enough buzz, I feel. You know, I think this one kind of flew under the radar for many people. But honestly, if you like any of Ryan Locket's games, you should check this one out. It's a solid title, The Ancient World. My number 7 is a game that from Portal was already a pretty good game in its own right, but it came in this like long box. It was very hard to learn. I mean, the rules were complex as all get out, and even then they weren't written particularly well. This was kind of an old problem that Portal games had. Vastly improved in recent years, but certainly was a bit of a problem back then. And the components were hit and miss. You know, it was a really, really good game. Loved it, had it. But it needed a second edition, really. And it finally did. Robinson Crusoe came out with a second edition that had some upgraded components, had a little bit of tweak to its artwork and its layout, came in a square box, thank you, easier to store on the shelf, and bulkier as well, so easier to put things in it. But what I really liked was they completely revamped the rulebook in this one. Yes, there's still a lot of rules. Yes, if you go away from this game and don't return to it, you're probably going to have to teach yourself the game again. But the rulebook, even though it's hard to get everything in your head, was a massive upgrade from the previous one. I mean, the game was a chore to learn from the first version, but the second edition made it a lot better. In conjunction, I think, with, I can't remember if he did a video or not. He either did a video or he had a big helping in this rulebook, Paul Grogan, Gaming Rules, and it shows. You know, this one is much easier to learn the game, even though there is quite a lot to absorb. Certainly, if I want to return to it anytime soon, then it will be easier for me to do it now with this version than the previous one. And, you know, all in all, it brought it back. This one got a lot of buzz when it was appearing. It's like, oh, some upgraded wooden components and a square box that's bulkier and a better rulebook. You know, this all sounded pretty good. And I think at that point, Robinson Crusoe was kind of on the way out. You know, people were forgetting about it, or it was appearing on a lot of clearance sales. And then this one came out, and I don't tend to see Robinson Crusoe appear on any Bring 'em Buy ever. Solid game, solid reprint, my number 7. My number 6. Now remember what I said at the start, that I don't have to love every single game on this list. You know, I'm evaluating it not only on how much I enjoyed them, but how much I think the reprint was a solid reprint. And I have to give this one credit. I'm not the biggest fan of this game. I think I ranked it a 6 when I first reviewed it. It's probably closer to a 5 now. I don't ever seek it out, but if it's the only option on the table, I'll play it. Even though both of them are exactly the same, just because one adds beer and the other one doesn't, it doesn't make it different. But, yeah, Brass. What? I have to give Brass some credit here. Not my favourite game by a long shot. It's a heavy economic game, it's a dull theme, who cares about coal and iron and cotton? Oh, geez, you know, Industrial Age is not interesting, okay? But, credit where it's due. This was a game I hated in its old day, you know, I mean, I was disgusted with the old version. It looked horrible, it was bad to play, hard to learn. It had an app that someone made which had the worst tutorial ever conjured up in existence. There was nothing in the game to help you understand what you were supposed to be doing or how to play it. I hated it. It would be like a 1 out of 10 for me. It was garbage. And this one, like, okay, great, we're bringing this game back. But wow. When I saw that cover, holy, I was like, oh, hello, this could be interesting. And it brought me back to try it again and give it another chance. Roxy Games brought this reprint out, and this artist, fair play. You made it for this game, great. But can you please work on some other games that I'm going to like more? Because I want this artist on other games. He managed to make something as dull looking as the Industrial Age, you know, appear gorgeous on a box cover and on the boards. It fits the theme of it very nicely. The component quality was upgraded with these cool tiles. The better cards with like really nice artwork pictures on them. The clay poker chips if you bought the deluxe version as well. I mean, the cardboard versions were fine as well, but the clay poker chips. Oh, wow. If you're going to bring back an economic game, this is how you do it. Even though it's not a game I'm going to seek out and probably will never play again, or at least not play for a long, long time unless I'm forced to. But credit to Roxy Games. You did it right. This is how you do it. It made me play it again. It made me play it enough times to give it a decent review. It's one of my most popular review videos, I think, from that year, actually. And people were, on the good side and the bad side. Like, I don't like this game. I love it. Why do you hate it for this? I agree with your points here. And it was a very highly discussed video. You can go back and watch it. But, yeah, give it credit for it to basically take a game which I was considering like as 1 out of 10 garbage and make me get interested in it again to the point where I wanted to play it multiple times and give it a proper review. That speaks a lot for the power this reprint had. I just wished that it was made, probably streamlined a little bit more, still is very punishing. And as much as the whole Birmingham thing came in, all it does is just adds beer, which is basically another way to get screwed over in the game, as if there wasn't enough ways for that to happen in the original one. But you still got the luck of the draw with the cards, which I'm not a fan of, and it's still like, oh, it's all about the turn order, and it's all about manipulating turn order. It's like, whatever. And of course, it's a theme I don't give one monkey's about. But, that's just my opinion. This is still highly popular. Loads of people love this game. And to be fair, even if you only like it for how it looks, I can easily see why. This was a solid reprint. Credit, it deserved at least a midway point on my top 10. However, if you're going to talk about economic games, it's not my favorite genre. But one economic game last year, as a reprint, made me enjoy highly an economic game. Wow. And I don't mind some economic games when they're light economic games. I like Airlines Europe. I like Stockpile. I like these lighter economic games where it's all about, let's make a ton of money and mess around with shares and things like that. But this one basically managed to make me go, wow, a proper heavy economic game. It can be interesting. It can be brain-burny. It can deal a ton with money. It can deal with making companies. It can deal with a theme that's interesting. And it can be made to look gorgeous. Well done, Predaporter. Yeah, you saw this coming. This one deserves this spot. The only heavy economic game that I can say I love. I gave this a 9 out of 10 when I reviewed it, and I would still give it a 9 out of 10 now. It's a bit long, and you are going to trounce everybody you play it with if they've only played it for the first time. But it works. The theme is so strong in this one, and it's hard to do that in most economic games, or at least to have a strong theme that's interesting. It's always like, I'm buying and selling oil. Yay! Whatever. So I really have no patience with these like train games, oil games, coal games, iron games. There are more interesting things we can buy and sell than oil resources. But fashion, I'm not exactly a fashion expert, come on. And I'm certainly not like into fashion per se. But the theme with making a fashion company just worked. You were buying all these materials in order to get these designs into a show that happened once every quarter in the game. And you could make the collection as big as you wanted, but it had to be the same color. And there were different styles. You got money for those designs. You had to build up your social media presence, your like what's the word? Brag about your like quality of your materials used. Were they from the local dealer? Did they come from overseas? How trendy are your clothes? Are they going to be the next like fashion trend? And these things they were ranked differently in different shows, and you were going for some of them or all of them. You're competing with other players. And on top of that, you're building up a company at the end of the day. So you have to get employees. You have to build buildings. You enter contracts, which diminish in their effectiveness as the game progresses. It just is a brilliant, heavy economic game. And I think a lot of the reason I like it is down to how smooth it is. Yes, there's a bit to learn, and certainly it's heavy. It's going to burn your brain with trying to organize your money. But it just feels smooth. The actions are smooth. All the locations make sense. There are 1 or 2 cards, I admit, who have got some very dodgy descriptions. I recommend you go to the Portal website and download the Almanac for this game so that it explains what those card abilities do better. That was a bit of a letdown, but aside from that blemish, it was just a smooth experience, and the theme just sung to me. Remember, good mechanics will make me enjoy a game. A solid, strong interesting theme will make me come back for the second go. And that's not always true. It's not like a universal law. It's not like a watertight law. There have been exceptions, you know, Pulsar 2849 and stuff, for example, but it's a rule that can be generally applied to a lot of games I have in my collection. It's why theme is such a big deal for me. You know, the mechanics of Sentinels and the multiverse, you know, it's a lot of bookkeeping, there's a bit of admin, but the theme of that game just brings me back again and again and again, and it works for a lot of other games. So, yeah, you know, this one I think was going to get done as a video game thing. I'm glad it didn't. I think the fashion thing works better because it's something unique. It hasn't been done before. You know, Rococo people talk about. Yeah, whatever. That game could be about anything. You know, it's a dry mechanical Euro game. Not a bad one, but it could literally be about anything else. It didn't have to be about fashion. So if you want a strong fashion theme, you get Pret-a-Porter. So what can I say? You know, a heavy economic game. It was long out of print, needed a third edition, and Ignacy did a fantastic job with it. So, yep, deserves my number 5 spot. My number 4 is on the shelf over there from Ludi Creations. This is another game that's like several years old. I forget when this one came out. I think it was like 2011, 2010 maybe. But it's a good 7-8 plus years old. It might even be older than that actually. But yeah, either way, a long time out of print. You know, badly needed bringing back into the limelight. At least according to some people like Tom Basso who raved about this game. But I have to admit, I was like, is this game really that good? You know, is it going to be that fun? Certainly looks the business. It is a lot of fun. On the Underground. The On the Underground is this really cool network building game where you are in Berlin or London, and there's going to be more maps for it with different subways. That'll be really cool. It's got this beautiful Stark aesthetic look with the white background and all your different sort of like colored network routes being on there, and these towers that you can get. I mean, depends if you get the deluxe version or not, but you know, these towers that you can potentially have to mark locations. But what's happening is that there is a passenger, the world's laziest passenger. He or she is constantly traveling from A to B in various different locations, and you're trying to get them to use your route, your network, because doing so gets you points. So you're building your network in such a way that you think they'll use them more often. But the trick is that the passenger wants to do the least amount of walking possible. Like I said, the laziest passenger ever. So he will take as many networks as it takes to get from A to B if it means walking a minimal amount of distance. And the game has you constantly trying to gauge where is that passenger going to go. If he has to go over there, will she want to go from there to there via my network? It's currently going to use theirs, but maybe I can steal it if I just put that piece there. There's a lot of good planning opportunities here, a good little bit of that indirect take that where you steal the passenger away from them, but it looks gorgeous compared to the previous version, which I think looked a bit meh. I wasn't a fan of the way that looked, but it was many years ago. This one looks beautiful on the table. Everything's kind of enlarged. It's a lot easier to see what's going on the board. It turns heads every time somebody walks past this game. Not the best with 5 players, admittedly, and 4 gets a bit long as well, but as a 2 to 3 player game, this is a lot of fun. And I'm hoping that, actually, have I got it already, or did I? Oh no, he's supposed to be sending me it, actually. I wonder if he's forgotten about it. I better remind him, but I was getting sent the solo mode for this, which maybe I'll do as a solo video if I can ever get back into those solo videos. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But this, like, changed the aesthetics, it streamlined the rules, it improved the components, it just brought this really cool game that we barely knew about back into the limelight, and it deserves this number 4 spot. Really entertaining game, it's in my collection. This could suit a game cafe environment as well because there's a lot of thinkiness to it, but it's a very, very simple game to learn. Once you've got that whole passenger movement thing down, you're set and good to go. Really solid game from Ludi Creations. On the Underground 2.0. My number 3, talk about another game that people have barely heard of. I mean, this one must have slipped under the radar for a lot of people, and if it wasn't for Z Garcia constantly praising this game, chances are you would have never heard of it. Certainly I would have never heard of it. This is a co-op game that has been brought back by Elf Creek Games, and wow, did it get a big aesthetic upgrade from its original version, which wasn't bad, but The new one is gorgeous, covered in Vincent Dutrait artwork with these tiles that you build up. You can even get a play mat for it, so it sits on this this ocean floor with all these tiles on. I'm of course talking about Atlantis Rising, the second edition of that came out at Essen last year. This is I didn't know what to expect from this game. All I heard was hearsay on it was really good, but I thought, come on, gotta go into it, clear my head, see what I think of this game. It's a really good co-op, and we need better co-ops lately, ones that aren't just card games. This one has you putting meeples out on this island that is sinking, and you're in Atlantis, and you're trying to build this machine that can lift your island up and teleport it to somewhere else. I don't know, random sci-fi plot here. But what you're doing is that you're building the individual components, and as you build them, you get special abilities or effects. But you put your meeples on the end of these peninsula islands, and they get you different resources or trigger different effects. But as each round progresses, you have to draw cards from a deck, a bit like something out of Forbidden Island, that kind of thing, where bad stuff happens to you, and the ends of certain islands will sink. And if your worker is on that space, they come back to you and you don't get the effect. But the further out into the peninsula you go, the better the action is. So there's a bit of push your luck aspect. It's complete co-op. Yeah, you might get a little bit of the alpha gamer problem if you are prone to that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, you can't really alpha game what the deck's going to do to you. You have to be able to react to it. There's a good amount of discussion. The components are varied each game. You know, you can have different setups. You've got player abilities. And did I mention it looks gorgeous? You know, Vincent Dutrait's artwork is solid. Not my favorite artist. That's only because it's not my usual style of artwork. But it is colourful, it is gorgeous. If you have seen me play this game in pictures with the playmat and that version, I don't even have the deluxe version. You can get the deluxe version if you want for the extra quality and components, but the components are all really good in the normal version. I just got the playmat and it will turn heads. Oh my god, is it beautiful. So beautiful. But it's also a solid game in its own right. I barely even knew who Elf Creek Games was. I'd never heard of them before. As soon as I saw this, it's like, I want to know what else you're doing, because this was good. Really good. Solid. Atlantis Rising. Right, after doing a PortalCon vlog and now this, I'm starting to lose my voice a bit. So we'll have to get this one on with. But my number 2. We're going back into some games that aren't like last year now. You know, I mean, last year was really good for reprints, but there are still a couple of reprints that hold their own to this day. This one is, where is that sitting? Oh, yep, you're over there on the shelf. I wonder if you can see it from there. Yes, you can, actually. This is a fantasy flight game. It is good with up to 6 players. It has brilliant colourful components, and it is a relatively straightforward Citadels 2.0 style game where your astronauts are trying to land on Mars and colonize, get resources off the planet, but it's area majority that gets the resources. And much like Citadels, you have to play a character card with a special ability in simultaneously with other players, and they go in different orders. It's a solid fun game. Mission Red Planet was a fantastic, second edition version of this game that was so long out of print, and I heard everybody talk about this. Tom and Z and Sam on the Dice Tower were always going on about this game, and I heard other reviewers do it, other people do it. It's like, I want to play this game. Finally, I did. It's still in the collection to this day. It is a brilliant area control game with the Citadel's fantastic role selection mechanic on top. It is easy to teach. It's not even a long game. I mean, before you know it, the game has ended. It's like, wow, that was quick. But the turn angst with the cards, with the character cards, that you have to play a card in order to get them back, so your choices diminish as you go through. People can see what characters you've played. There's stuff that can really annoy other players, like blowing up a spaceship before it launches, or changing the trajectory of a ship so that it was going to go there, now it's going to go wee over there, and it's infuriating at times. But it's so smooth, it's straightforward to learn. And compared to what the first edition looked like, where I saw, this weird sort of steampunky style thing, and it wasn't a fan of the artwork in it, and the components looked a bit chintzy there, this is a good production, and not even that expensive a game. It's really good value. This is one of those few games where I'm like, I got 5 or 6 players. This could work. It really is that good of a game, and, to be one of my favorite games ever, to be that smooth, that streamlined, that well produced, that so needed to be reprinted, deserves number 2. Mission Red Planet, if you have not had a chance to try this game out, you really, really owe it to yourself to. And my number 1, yeah, probably called it. I mean, yeah, I think most of you have probably called this one, particularly if you've been paying attention to my top 100. There was a game set in the Cthulhu universe, and it involved, players going up against one kind of dungeon master, going through these different scenarios and trying to investigate clues, solve a mystery, almost like Scooby-Doo meets Cthulhu. And it was a decent game, but it was prone to breaking. It was horrendously complicated, and it was just quite fiddly. You had to have a DM player running it. It just had way too many problems to be that good of a game. My God. What they did to make Mansions of Madness 2.0 is nothing short of genius. By doing what I think more games need to do and introducing an app facility for it. Yes, it took away the DM and all the fiddly bookkeeping and rules knowledge and replaced it with a really cool functioning app that provides combat moves, voiceovers for the introduction, ambient music, a map that you can see on the screen and you can build out of tiles and on the table. And yeah, I hear the expressions, I wanted to just play a video game. Why do we just play on the app? It's still good to have that tactile feeling, but the app takes away the bookkeeping aspect. You could practically just push a few people into this game and say, right, choose a character. This is your introduction. Go. And the app will handle everything else for you. It will tell you what rooms to put in, what monsters to do. It will explain combat. You'll get the little puzzles like moving around little mosaic things, which I always struggle with actually. And the key lock picking stuff and various other puzzles have come into it. There's a ton of content for it now. It is a money sink like you wouldn't believe. If anything, the only thing I can fault this one for is the miniatures are not that great. Yeah, but I'm not as fussed about whether the miniatures are amazing or not. And to be honest, the miniatures themselves aren't the problem. It's just those really annoying bases that they have where you're supposed to put like the token in there. You can play it with just those tokens, and sometimes I do that for ease, but sometimes I just want to have the cool miniature on the table as well, especially the boss characters. So yeah, could have been better. But it still gets my number 1 spot though, because it is such a fun game. I love this one. It was a top 10 game for me 2 years in a row, I think. Possibly more, or is it only 2 years? I don't know. But it just works. This is like the best implementation of an app into a board game I've seen. And I would say it's on par, if not slightly better than what the Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth has done. Although this is kind of heavily based on that, so you can see that there are similarities. But yeah, it was like a revolution in its design where it basically took what was a failing first edition and then just said, nope, second edition here. This is what it's like. Here's the app. Here's that big giant box. Here's the scenarios, all wonderfully thematic, dripping with story and theme and different lengths. It could be like anything from 90 minutes to like 4 hours plus. Granted, I don't usually want to play this with multiple players. I tend to just simply take 3 or 4 characters and basically just control them myself as a big solo experience. But wow, this game is amazing. And if you're not a Cthulhu fan or a big little dungeon crawly fan, then yes, I can understand why you probably wouldn't go for this game. But for me, this was a reprint that was not only needed for practicality reasons, but was needed because I wanted to really dive deep into this game and go insane with it. And thankfully, I did. Mansions of Madness 2.0, my number 1 reprint. So that's my top 10 reprints, and there were some honourable mentions on here as well. Cosmic Encounter, the 42nd edition version, was a good way to get into this game, with some revamped components and a nice little guide to what aliens you could use. What else was there? I considered Viticulture Essentials, but I didn't really consider it a full-on reprint because it basically just re-released the game but just put a few modules in it that weren't previously in it. And if anything, it's confusing because it was hard to tell which one you were supposed to get, but it still wanted you to get Tuscany Essentials because the best bit out of Tuscany, the new board, isn't in Viticulture Essentials. So you still need Tuscany Essentials to really get the most out of this game. So a weird idea, and yeah, even if it was a reprint, wouldn't have made the list. Innovation, 3rd edition, they went back to the ugly look for graphic design. I quite liked what Yellow had done for the 2nd edition version, but now you can get all the expansions in one go, so still pretty decent. The Dale of Merchants, I thought about that, but they didn't really change the rules. They just made a big collector's box for it, so that didn't really count. And what else was there? And not much else on that I was considering. However, the Patreon choice, there was 2 that kind of got equal votes, and one of them was Predaporter, so people were agreeing with me on that. But the other one that I have to mention, because obviously I can't have a clash here, and that is Fury of Dracula, the 3rd edition. Now, this one is interesting. I mean, I quite liked how the 2nd edition looked. That's not to say I didn't like how the 3rd edition looked, but I thought aesthetics, I actually preferred the 2nd edition from a looks-wise. It looked more grittier and darker. The cover of the 3rd edition, I mean, forget the 4th edition, it's got a couple of tweaks in it, but mainly I'm talking about 2nd to 3rd edition here. And, you know, it's kind of a weird cover. It just makes it look a bit too cartoony. But it did streamline the rules a bit. It did make an improved rule book, some upgraded components as well, and made this, a cool game in its own right. Certainly something that more people could get, because it was not impossible, I think, to get the 2nd edition of Fury of Dracula for a while. It just got stupidly expensive. But I was glad to see this one get done, and I have played it, used to own it. I don't think I do anymore because it was just hard to get to the table. It's a really long hidden movement game. I have Spectre Ups in the other room. I have Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space there. They do it in quicker time, and I kind of prefer those themes. So, yeah, I'm not a massive Dracula fan. So I got rid of it, but it's still a solid game. But reprinting from 2nd to 3rd edition, I didn't think was such a huge change, or certainly a huge beneficial change, considering the 2nd edition was not exactly bad. It was a pretty solid edition that, I don't know, it just didn't seem as big of a jump for me. But the Patreons, or at least half of them, went with Fury of Dracula, and I'll go with that as the Patreon choice. So that's it for this top 10. I'm going to wrap this video up and watch a few CW shows, and possibly Doctor Who as well. I got some catching up to do after getting back from Poland. The next top 10 I do will probably, I can't remember, the Patreons have voted on what they wanted to see next, and it was either top 10 middleweight games or top 10 games with a high replay value. I think it was the latter, but we'll see. But those 2 are definitely the top 10s to come next from their vote. If you want to vote and give your Patreon choice for these videos, then come to my Patreon campaign, donate $5 a month, and you'll get to vote on which lists I do next, and also submit your choices for those top 10 Patreon choices to see if it can get mentioned and talked about. And of course, at the $5 level, you can also submit questions for my Q&A sections I'm doing on the podcast, and get early access to my review videos before anybody else does on YouTube. So that's it from me. If you like what you see, subscribe and ding the don and all that gubbins. But for now, I'm going to sign off. So take care, and remember, regardless of whether your game is brand new, reprinted or otherwise, it's still only a game. Take care, enjoy, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.